Ultimately, Disney's male protagonists have evolved a ton, from the one-dimensional princes of the early classics to more relatable, emotionally complex figures like Ian or Ralph. But while Disney continues to primarily rely on archetypes to tell engaging stories, Ghibli's male characters remind us that masculinity in storytelling doesn't have to be larger than life. It can be quiet, thoughtful, and deeply human.
ミゲル・ムヌエラさんという方が、ジブリとディズニーの男性キャラクターの描き方の違いにフォーカスを当て、その効果や理由を考察していました。では早速ご覧ください。
Disney's male characters consist of champions, gods, and heroes of all types, while Ghibli's are, well, just people. But which is truly more memorable, and what does that say about masculinity in storytelling? Let's break it down, and trust me, the reason for these differences isn't just about culture. It's something that's going to completely change the way you see both studios. Let's be real. Disney's male protagonists are some of the most iconic in all of animation, but they usually fall into a few concrete Disney archetypes. Take Aladdin, for example. He's the quintessential Disney adventurous hero. Bold, charming, and out to prove himself. He's driven by a desire to escape his circumstances and be seen as more than just a street rat, using his wit and charm to get through tough spots, but much of his arc centers on self-worth. His romance with Jasmine is obviously very important, but his internal struggle to believe he's worthy of love and success grounds his character in something actually super relatable, which can't be said for all Disney male characters. Or take Simba, another adventurous hero. As a child, he's brash and eager to embrace his future as king, but then the biggest betrayal in all of human history happens, animal history I guess, which leaves him shattered, obviously. His internal conflict of running from his guilt versus stepping into his destiny is layered over the external battle to reclaim his kingdom. Simba's arc is amazing because it's both deeply personal and universally resonant, but at its core, it's just a familiar story of reclaiming a rightful place. And then there are the lovable underdogs like Kuzco, who starts as entirely unlikable, self-absorbed, egotistical, and oblivious to the consequences of his actions.
Let me guess, you have a great personality.
His transformation into a humble, self-aware leader is the heart of the film. But what makes him unique is that the humor drives much of his growth. The story uses his flaws as a source of comedy while still giving him a meaningful arc. Then there's the underrated king, Jim Hawkins, who's an underdog trying to find his place in the world. Initially a rebellious and misunderstood teenager, the adventure he embarks on pushes him to grow and mature. His arc focuses on earning respect, learning to trust others, and discovering his own potential, making him both relatable and inspiring despite his rough exterior. He could also fit into the adventurous hero bucket, but yeah. And of course, we have a Disney classic, the romantic supports, like Prince Eric or Flynn Rider. They basically exist to complement the girl's story, but with their own unique flair and charm. Prince Eric, while not really that complex at all, is still kind-hearted and adventurous. Flynn, on the other hand, is way more dynamic, initially being this cocky douche. His relationship with Rapunzel actually changes him to show vulnerability and let go of his facade. Flynn's arc is one of my favorites because of its humor, emotional payoff, and the fact that he even has an arc, which isn't really the case for Prince Eric and a lot of other princes. Spoiler. Flynn is also a testament to the evolution of some of Disney's character archetypes over time. We then also have the noble figure, like Mufasa. These are the straight-laced characters which are often more reserved, naturally good and virtuous, and basically serve to contrast with the more flawed or adventurous protagonist. Finally, there's the comedic sidekick, my personal favorite of Disney's archetypes, embodied by characters like Mushu and Timon and Pumbaa. These are low-key the best, making us all laugh more than we should, and while they may assist the protagonist in their journey, their arcs are rarely as significant. They exist mainly to provide comic relief, but they can also have moments where they deliver valuable lessons or help move the story along.
Things will work out.
Which is so worth it. Oh, and shout out to the romantic support light characters. All those princes from the OG classics that had the personalities of cardboard. Anyway, there are definitely exceptions like Quasimodo, who we'll talk about later, but they're few and far between, and that's because these archetypes usually serve Disney's storytelling goals well. They're relatable, easy to root for, and fit into the larger escapist fantasies the studio aims to create. But the limitations are pretty clear too. Most of these characters are designed to be larger than life, and are usually super predictable since they usually stick to external arcs of heroism or romance. So for Ghibli, it's normally quite the opposite than Disney. They don't feel bound by archetypes, they're more nuanced, sometimes conflicted, and often operate in the background to support a larger, more complex narrative. But is one approach inherently better than the other? I'll get to that. Ashitaka is a great example of what I'm talking about. He doesn't seem like a movie character on the screen to serve some narrative purpose. As we see him travel from his clan, the Amishi village, to the west, we see him walking, riding, trading, and meeting people, resting after a long day. It's kind of like a vlog, like very real and raw. There's no performative nature to his character. He's reserved and pensive. His journey throughout the movie also isn't about like winning a princess's heart. It's about finding a balance between human progress and nature's preservation. He's super selfless, driven by compassion, and driven to solve problems without needing to be a hero in the traditional sense for the most part. And then there's Haku. While he doesn't steal the spotlight in the same way as some Disney heroes, Haku plays a crucial role in Chihiro's development. His story is one of self-discovery and connection, helping Chihiro find her inner strength while also grappling with his own identity issues. Haku isn't the protagonist, but his presence is so important in Chihiro's development, reflecting Ghibli's tendency to highlight subtle yet profound relationships. Even Seiji, a relatively minor character, stands out. His quiet determination to pursue his dreams despite the practical challenges he faces acts as both a source of inspiration and a counterbalance to Shizuku's own personal growth. Seiji doesn't engage in grand adventures or feats of heroism, but his persistence and focus on his craft provide Shizuku with the emotional and psychological support she needs to also find her own path. As with Ashitaka and Haku, he quietly pushes others towards growth without ever dominating the narrative at all, and that's what I love about all of them. And then there's everyone's favorite drama queen, Hao. Unlike the typical bold heroes of animation, Hao is just a self-absorbed vain guy. But his true character arc is one of surprisingly insane transformation, both emotionally and psychologically. Hao's journey isn't about saving the world, well, maybe a bit, but about confronting his own fears, accepting vulnerability, and learning to care for others. His self-centeredness is a facade, hiding a deeper insecurity and a fear of loss that Sophie uncovers as the movie progresses. As he opens up, his inner strength emerges, but it's not through conventional heroism, although he does do a bit of that. Instead, Hao's growth comes from understanding his own limitations and learning to face the consequences of his actions, especially in his relationship with Sophie. This makes him a way more complex character than the traditional hero because his main battle is with himself. What makes Ghibli's male characters so compelling is that they're rarely the center of the story. Unlike Disney's heroes, Ghibli's main characters often act as supports to the larger narrative or to the female protagonists. Their arcs usually focus on inner growth rather than external achievement or recognition. They're not simply striving to win a battle or gain the spotlight, although of course that is usually part of it too. They are instead often defined by their ability to listen, reflect, grow from their experiences, and help their friend or lover in their story. This perfectly aligns with Ghibli's storytelling priorities: balance, emotional depth, and the beauty of everyday humanity. These characters embody the idea that true strength comes not from conquering enemies or achieving grand goals, but from understanding and evolving as individuals, often in the service of others. This subtlety and complexity are what make Ghibli's male characters so unforgettable. Even if they're not always the ones who take center stage, it goes to show how different masculinity can be portrayed in film. But I'll talk more about that in a sec. Of course, Disney has tried to break away from its male protagonist archetypes in recent years. Take Ralph, whose journey is all about self-acceptance and emotional growth, or Quasimodo, a rare Disney character that doesn't really fit into any category. Being deeply sympathetic, isolated by his appearance, but yearning for acceptance and connection. His arc doesn't really follow the typical hero's journey or romantic subplot at all. It's all about personal growth instead, finding the courage to stand up for himself and others. What sets Quasimodo apart even more is the utter sadness of his story. He doesn't get the girl at the end, and his heroism doesn't lead to some fairy tale ending, but his journey feels honest and actually human and realistic. But the key question is, what's the difference between Disney's archetypes and Ghibli's nuance, and is one inherently better than the other? I mean, we all know that Disney's male protagonists tend to be larger than life figures, designed to fit into some obvious molds. They're entertaining, iconic, and super easy to love, but they're rarely gonna surprise us. They also will usually get the girl at the end. Ghibli, on the other hand, like I said, focuses on creating male characters who feel like real people. They're often flawed, emotionally vulnerable, and guided by their relationships rather than individual goals. They're also usually not front and center, rather being support characters to the strong and driven female protagonists. Let's go, I love that. And their relationship with said female protagonist doesn't always end in romantic relationships. It's more nuanced than that, you know, like Haku and Chihiro, San and Ashitaka, Pazu and Shita, Haru and the Baron. Yes, there are some romantic undertones with some of these, but it doesn't end in like a fairy tale wedding, you know what I mean? And of course, Ghibli does have romance stories, but they tend to be a tad more complex than Disney's. The thing is though, both approaches have their place. Not everyone's always looking for deep, complex characters. Sometimes you want to turn your brain off and watch Hercules save the day, or watch Tarzan leap around the forest with Jane. It's fun to watch these movies, and that's what Disney has kind of mastered, the element of enjoyment and excitement with their male characters. That being said, in my opinion, the more nuanced, complex stories and characters are the ones that usually leave a mark that lasts much more than the length of the movie. Not only that, it's important to show masculinity as more than just heroism and bravado, but rather vulnerability, depth, and compassion and stoicism. As fun as Disney's archetypes are, there's such an influence on millions of people that Disney has a responsibility to evolve beyond their boxed-in heroes. We need more guys like Ashitaka, Haku, and Seita in film and in real life. That being said, I can enjoy both types, and that's why I adore Ghibli and Disney equally. But it's clear the type of male characters that we need way more of in cinema. But that leaves us with an even deeper question that bothers me, and that many of you mentioned in my previous video. Why is it that there are these differences in storytelling? Well, there's a lot of reasons, but a large component comes down to culture. See, culturally, Disney's focus on action and adventure reflects a Western tradition of storytelling. It's about the hero's journey, triumph, and external achievements. In contrast, Ghibli's approach is deeply rooted in Japanese storytelling traditions, which emphasize subtlety, introspection, and the interconnectedness of people and the environment. Instead of focusing on external conflicts, Ghibli often explores internal struggles and moral dilemmas. Ashitaka and Chihiro aren't just trying to win, but to find balance within themselves and the world around them. This reflects Shinto and Buddhist ideas, where life isn't about clear wins, but finding harmony even in ambiguity. Which is kind of beautiful, by the way. In storytelling terms, we in the West are usually accustomed to the three-act structure, which is basically the setup, the confrontation or conflict, and the resolution. The entire story is for the most part based around conflict. But in the East, they have a vastly different storytelling structure called Kishotenketsu, I hope I didn't butcher that, which is composed of these four parts: Ki, the introduction; Sho, the development; Ten, the turn or twist; and Ketsu, the conclusion. Kishotenketsu doesn't rely on conflict, it's about change and growth, which is why Ghibli's calm moments matter so much. It might leave a portion of Western audiences confused and bored sometimes, but they're integral to Ghibli films and a huge factor in their amazing character development throughout a movie. Ultimately, Disney's male protagonists have evolved a ton, from the one-dimensional princes of the early classics to more relatable, emotionally complex figures like Ian or Ralph. But while Disney continues to primarily rely on archetypes to tell engaging stories, Ghibli's male characters remind us that masculinity in storytelling doesn't have to be larger than life. It can be quiet, thoughtful, and deeply human. And maybe, just maybe, that's something Disney should learn from as they continue to craft their characters in the future.
いかがでしたか？ディズニーとジブリの男性キャラクターの描き方にフォーカスを当て、深い洞察とともに論じていましたね。日本人の中にも、ディズニーの話は何かいつも似ていて単調で刺激が少ないな、くらいの感想を持っている人は少なくないと思いますが、ここまで見事に言語化できる人は多くはないのではないでしょうか。ジブリを好意的に評価している点は、単純に日本人として誇りに感じましたし、キャラクター性の違いを、三幕構成と起承転結の違いという点から論じていることは、大変興味深いと思いました。また一方で、ジブリの良いところを例に挙げて、見習うべきとする姿勢は、自分たちの文化がもっと良くなってほしいとする愛情を感じるもので、素敵に感じました。アニメや漫画が世界に広まりつつある昨今ですが、我々も彼のように他者から見習おうとする姿勢は忘れてはならないのかもしれませんね。皆さんはどう思いましたか？概要欄に元動画の URL を載せておくので、ぜひ、チャンネル登録といいねボタンを押しに行ってください。そしてもしこの動画が気に入ったら、このチャンネルでもぜひ、登録といいねボタンをお願いします。次の動画の励みになります。よろしくお願いします。